Ladies and gentlemen, the former director of the University of Wisconsin Marching Band, Mike Leckrone and Doug Moe. We welcome you back to our final half hour here on a Monday, October 24th, 35 past the hour of 1 o'clock. Now that is a way to make an entry, ladies and gentlemen, and they do it each and every Saturday at every home game at Camp Randall, the University of Wisconsin Marching Band. For those watching on the stream, I'm no Mike Leckrone, but I did get a special jacket and I have my marching band hat on. We are so honored to welcome the authors of this great new book called Moments of Happiness, a Wisconsin Band Story, the longtime 50-year former director of bands at the University of Wisconsin-Madison, Mike Leckrone, and author and columnist Doug Moe from here in Madison via StreamYard. Gentlemen, thank you so very much for taking the time for making my day. I don't care about the listeners today. This is for me.
Thank you, Todd.
Well, yeah, thanks for having us.
Well, it's such a pleasure. You've both been on the show, although, Mike, you probably don't remember. Doug's been on the show on this current iteration. But 31 years ago, a kid who was a broadcasting student at UW-Platteville and had a little TV show on Sunday nights across 13 communities had the audacity to call the band office and say, would Mr. Leckrone be willing to drive down and be on our show? I know he's getting ready to go to a Rose Bowl. And, Mike, you did. And you made the drive an hour and a half down to Platteville, and you came on our show, and it was one of the highlights of my life, really, as a kid who grew up at Richland Center, a band kid. My band director, Lauren Jensen, I believe was the first woman to play snare for you at Wisconsin and taught me everything I know. And to have you back on the show today, along with Doug, is just a gift. So thank you.
How can I top that introduction?
Yeah,
no, it's great.
It was.
I remember.
Do you really?
Oh yeah.
I think we had you and Sly on the same night. Sly was on WIBA at the time, and we had. I mean, I should have retired right then. I get Leckrone and Sly on the same show. Talk a little bit about this book, because how did it come to be? Whose idea was it, Mike? Was it yours or Doug's?
Well, I think I started with the germ of the idea a lot of people over the years had said, I would tell stories about some of the things that happened in the band, and I got the comment, well, you ought to write a book. You ought to write a book. And so finally I started doing it. And of course, I couldn't have done it without Doug, because basically I just started recollecting things that had happened to me. Some of the things, you mentioned the Rose Bowl, that was certainly a big part of my life at that point and still is. And Doug came in and really did the hard work. I mean, I still have the greatest admiration for his researching ability. He found out things I didn't even know or hadn't remembered, and it was amazing. So, once we got started on it, and he would come to the house, and I would dictate what I thought had happened, and then he would go fact check me and write up several pages, and then we kept doing that for almost a year.
One of the early ones, Todd, was Mike's from Indiana, and when he was at Butler University, he was doing the band, but he was also playing side gigs professionally, and he told me that he played at a lounge in Indianapolis, I think, called the Rat Fink Lounge. and he said that he'd always told that to the UW band kids, and they refused to believe that there actually was a place called the Rat Fink Lounge. And, of course, I was able to go through my newspaper research and find some stories from the 1950s, like the Rat Fink Lounge being closed down for health reasons. But he was able to prove to the band kids that it existed.
Well, Doug, you were on the show. You've been on the show a couple of times before. And the last time you were on, you mentioned about this project coming up. You know how excited I am. And thanks so much for both of you for being here. But Mike, or rather Doug, how did you, I mean, you've written other books, other people. How does it work to be a co-author like that, where it's really Mike's story in his words, but you're just there to kind of help the story along? What's that like as opposed to an author of your own work or like many columns you've done in Madison Magazine, Cap Times, other places?
Well, Todd, somebody said getting two people together to write a book is like getting three people together to make a baby. A lot can go wrong. But yeah, I've been pretty lucky in my collaborations. I think this one with Mike is as enjoyable as any of them have been. Probably because, we got along, but he was also extremely into the project, very conscientious about, reading. I would draft pages, as he just said a moment ago, based on our conversations, based on his recollections. And then Mike would go over them and say, in one instance, this I wouldn't have said it this way, that kind of thing. So it truly was a collaboration, but in the end, it's his story and his book. I felt privileged to be helping tell the story. Some days more privileged than others, I might say. But.
Yeah, I knew you would.
Mike, and again, I want people to buy this. I bought mine locally at Barnes & Noble, but buy it wherever you buy your books. Moments of Happiness, a Wisconsin band story. You can't have the Wisconsin band, Mike Leckrone. Mike, take us back. If you would share that one story in particular, it's in the book, but Doug touched on it. And you say in here, this is one of, if not the biggest thing you wanted all of your students to take away, as it was an ethic, a work ethic, and you learned it playing these kind of gigs that were not so great as a kid, and you're kind of like, you could have been kind of like, who cares? But what did you learn growing up on these gigs?
Well, I know Doug knows I talk a lot about my experience with Louis Armstrong, and the thing I remember most about that, I was on Louis Armstrong's bandstand. They wouldn't let me play, but I was on his bandstand for 3 hours one night, a little resort town in Indiana, Rochester, Indiana. And I sat up there and I watched Louis Armstrong, one of the great stars of, I was going to say music, and that's true. It's not just jazz, it's music. He was a great star. He was known all over the world. He had records. He was in this little dumpy dance hall. The audience probably didn't know much about him because it was a very mixed audience. He'd probably done the same show thousands and thousands of times, but he came on stage and played his heart out. And that impressed me so much because he was not doing it just because he had to, but because he loved doing it. And I started telling the students in my band, that's the kind of philosophy you have to have when you go in front of an audience. It doesn't matter what they're like, you may only find 2 or 3 people that like you, but you've got to play to them.
But bringing it every day like that, I mean, that's a lesson we should all learn in whatever vocation we're in, right?
Absolutely, yeah.
Doug, what when you co-wrote this with Mike, I mean, I want to get into this in a second, but this story, as for as many UW events as I've been to, and as many times I've sung and danced to, you've said it all, the Bud song, I didn't know where it really originated from in terms of Wisconsin. Doug, did you know about some of this stuff? I mean, you're a lifelong Madisonian. How did you get these stories from Mike's brain onto paper?
Well, the You've Said It All is probably my favorite of the songs that they do. So I think it was really one of the first times I sat down with Mike. I asked him about the origins of it, and I'll let him tell it because it involves another legendary UW figure, Bob Johnson, the late great hockey coach.
Well, yeah, I had great respect for Bob Johnson. He was always sort of needling me a little bit. But he kept saying, Mike, we need to have, we had band at the basketball games. He says, we need to have bands at hockey games. So I told Bob, well, we'll do 3 or 4 games and that'll be enough. And then Bob came back and said, Mike, we need you every Saturday night. And so I checked with the band. They said they could do it. Then after about a half a season of that, he says, Mike, we got to have you every night because the people who get Friday night tickets are complaining that they don't give a band. So, but he was not one to mince words either. I mean, he said, we really need you, but it made the kids in the band feel good because they did feel they did feel needed. So far as You Said It All was concerned, we started playing that at hockey games. It was a beer commercial at one point, and
wasn't there a student section, Mike, that started yelling for a polka?
that's right. Section GG. Every time we'd stop, they would say, "We want a polka. We want a polka." So I took this commercial tune and I changed the drum parts. I fiddled around with it, and I said, "Okay, we'll play a polka, and they'll leave us alone." So we played it. Next game, we want a polka. We want a polka, and then after 2 or 3 games, the students started inserting "When you say bam, bam, bam."
We can say it, Budweiser. That was the beer, yeah.
But when we got to that, the students would stand up and say the song, and I thought, that's probably not a good idea. We're going to be chastised for selling beer products, and I didn't want them to think the students were drinking.
Who would have thought
shocking.
that? Yeah, right.
But it became a shout down. I told the band, turn around and say it, and try to drown out the people who are saying Budweiser with "You say Wisconsin," and eventually we won them over, and it really caught on. There were a whole lot of instances where we played it, and it was a big part of the event. I mean, we played at the Boston Gardens in 1973 when we won the national championship. So it became very quickly a part of our tradition.
And played a part in starting the 5th quarter.
Absolutely,
really.
yep. That was one of the things we depended on. It was automatic response from the crowd when you did You Said It All, and boy, it's neat to have that.
About 3 minutes left here before our first break. Our family had season tickets for hockey for a while, but the story you just told, it was in the old Dane County, it's still there, but the Dane County Coliseum. I remember you, Mike, you probably couldn't get away with it with OSHA and all the attorneys today, but you get a step ladder and you'd be climbing up the railings, to get the crowd into it. Did anybody from the UW ever say, geez, Mike, maybe you shouldn't do that?
No, I think they were anxious to see if I would fall, break my neck, and not be a bother anymore.
Todd, he actually got in more trouble, if not real trouble, but at the basketball games, because at one point he actually led the band in 3 Blind Mice, referencing the less than stellar officiating at the field house.
It wouldn't have been too bad, except John Pallas, the coach at the time, as we started playing it, he stood up on the bench and started conducting. So the refs, we didn't get a technical. I always thought we should have, but maybe I hoped we should have.
But I think another thing is revealed in this book, and again, it's called Moments of Happiness, a Wisconsin band story by Mike Leckrone and Doug Moe. You were quite the athlete, Mike, and for a time you thought, maybe is music really my thing? You could have gone into coaching. I didn't know that.
Well, yeah, my dad was very adamant about learn about several vocations that you might like, and the 3 that I had chosen was music, and then I was thinking about being a chemist because I had a great interest in chemistry at the time, and then thinking about being a coach. And I played athletics all during my high school career, and I thought I was pretty good, but I tried to play for a brief time at Butler University, and I discovered that there's a lot of difference between Chester Township High School and Butler University basketball, but it was a great experience. And I think as a result of that, I like to think that I think like a coach in those kind of situations, pressure situations.
Just think, it could have been Mike Leckrone taking on going up against Tom Izzo instead of Bo Ryan. But no, he was the coach of the Badger Band, the director of the Badger Band. More with Mike Leckrone and Doug Moe on the Civic Media Radio Network. show of the Civic Media Radio Network. It is 9 before the hour of 2 o'clock. If you want to be a Badger, come along with us for the next 9 minutes or so. We are talking to the longtime 50-year director of marching bands at the University of Wisconsin, Mr. Mike Leckrone, and his co-author on this great new book, Doug Moe, an author and a columnist in his own right. It's called Moments of Happiness, a Wisconsin Band Story. And boy, gentlemen, you hit it out of the ballpark. It is a winner all the way around. Doug, tell folks, because for our listeners, particularly down in Racine, Kenosha, Waukesha, Milwaukee, heck, I mean, all of our stations across the state, but there's an event to meet you guys, to get the book signed, and to listen to it. Tell us about that, please.
Yeah, that's a week from tomorrow night, October 29th at Boswell Book Company in Milwaukee at 6:30. I'll be teeing up Mike to tell some of the best stories from the book, and hope to see everybody there.
Milwaukee, October 29th at Boswell Book Company, 6:30 in the evening. Mr. Zommers will put that on our show notes, and we'll keep plugging it for you guys as well. I would encourage everyone to get on out there and see that. One of the things, Mike, that I didn't know, again, in reading this book, I mean, you've always been a showman. I mean, that's the thing. I mean, going out to, I've had the privilege and honor to being at 3 Rose Bowls now, 2 of which you were at. The last one, of course, you had retired by that point. But boy, your enthusiasm, your showmanship really made these events for me and so many others. You gave us moments of happiness. Tell folks where that showmanship came from. I didn't know you and your dad did vaudeville, basically.
Well, we called it vaudeville. It was, I think vaudeville was dead by that point, but maybe we killed it. But well, he was a band director, and I started out by, when band directors get called on to provide music for almost everything. Mm-hmm. And so we started putting some shows together, and he was a great musician, a terrific piano player, and we started putting these bits and pieces together of a show, like an act in vaudeville. And before we got done, we had 35 minutes of material that we could use, and we did quite a bit of performing on it. I think there was several weeks where we did 3 shows in 1 week. Wow. And I was in high school. I was a high school kid, so yeah, it's one of those things that there's nothing like being in front of a live audience, because they'll tell you whether it's any good or not. And and so that was one of I learned a lot from just doing that. And Dad was a great mentor, so I didn't have to go it alone. He was there to push me up in a lot of things.
The title, Moments of Happiness. Tell us how this came to be, because it's just, I was at one of your final concerts, the spring band concert, and you told this story there. Tell our listeners, our viewers, where this came from.
Well, you mentioned Rose Bowl a minute ago. The term Moments of Happiness happened when we were getting ready for our final rehearsal for that first Rose Bowl, that 93-94, which was unbelievable. But we had a meeting just before we dismissed for the day, and I said, tomorrow you're going to have an opportunity that hundreds of thousands of people wish they could experience the Rose Bowl from inside, and you have no idea how many former band people would give anything to do what you're going to do. I said, don't take it for granted. Look around, take in everything that you can, and remember this moment of happiness, because it's going to get you through some of those days when it's not so happy. And I started using that from that point on at the beginning of each school year when I would meet the band for the first time. And I told them, there's going to be moments of happiness, but there's going to be some other moments too. So let the moments of happiness take you through it.
One of our listeners off the text line here, and a pretty famous alum of UW, Kelly Call, who, of course, went on to be president of CBS Entertainment for a number of years, has been on our show with his new movie, by way of plug, Just a Bit Outside, the story of the 82 Brewers. Go and see it if you haven't. But he texted in and said, Mike was also a tremendous professor, taught big band class, my favorite class at UW.
Well, the only thing I can say to that is it must have been an easier class than I thought. No, that was fun. That was fun for me. there were several instances where people on the faculty said, well, you ought to give it up. You're very busy doing the band things. And I didn't want to give that up because it was for me, my degree is in music history. Most people don't know that. But I have a degree in music history. So I wanted to keep that part of what I did alive. And so I kept doing it, but it was fun to teach. The older I got, the less the students knew about big bands, but it was fun teaching them. That was part of the fun of doing it.
Guys, this time has gone so fast. Professor Leckrone, thank you for giving me and my family all these great moments of happiness. Doug, thank you for doing this project with Mike and giving us this great book. Today's my birthday. This is the best birthday present I could have ever gotten. So thank you guys. And yesterday was Kelly's birthday, by the way. We're going to wrap things up with a tagline. I don't think I'll have to cue Professor Leckrone too much, but thank you guys. One last tune from your band. It is your band. 50 years. You made it. Thanks for giving us these moments of happiness.
Thank you so much.
Cheers, Todd.
But Mike, at Wisconsin, we never really say goodbye, right? We just say...
We'll see you real soon, and on Wisconsin.
See you tomorrow, everybody. Have a great afternoon. Maggie Dawn is next, right here on the Civic Media Radio Network.
Throwing the script was a nice touch.